And I think we are live. It's just popped up into my screen that we're on and good to go. I'm just waiting. A couple more people are joining us at the moment. I'll just give them a minute or two to connect. And I think that we're pretty good to go. So I'm going to start off with a massive welcome to everyone who has joined me today for a webinar that I think will provide some help and assistance as we move forward to preparing for our students, one, to return, and two, when they actually do walk through the door. Look, a number of familiar names again that have popped up there in the attendees list, and I want to say thanks to the people who keep coming back, but also a really warm welcome to anyone who is new to the Shutdown Brunch webinars that we've been offering over the course of the last couple of weeks. Today is webinar number 17, and from a personal point of view, it's the last one that I'll be running. So hopefully I finish on a bit of a high for everyone who's involved today. Look, the landscape in education just continues to change, and it's, I guess, it's interesting to watch from a step away from schools. Just, today, I guess for Victorian schools in particular, but also for a number of other schools who have returned to this remote learning concept, to a new environment. And I can only speak from a point of view of a family member who has a total of 6 people sitting around the education sort of table, and we're all back at work in some way, shape or form today. It's been really interesting just to watch the excitement and the different take from my own kids' point of view. We actually started the day with a bit of a circle just to kick things off and make sure that we were ready to learn. So they're out on their task, and I know that extends to a number of other schools who are doing some amazing things. And I guess why I set that up is because, what really has amazed me, I guess, over the course of the last few weeks is the way that our educators have responded and the way that they have embraced this challenge that sits in front of us. And, I'm not going to sort of go down the lines of Scott Morrison's announcements or video this morning and go to that extent, but I do really want to say well done to, one, the leaders of the schools who are doing an awesome job, but also to the teachers who are in the front line there, and the work that you are doing to support the kids who are in your care. Look, today I'm just going to quickly talk through the functions of the webinar for the people who are new to this webinar arrangement. So what we've got, as you will see, somewhere sitting around your screen, there's a number of options or functions that you can choose to use. The first thing I want to point out would be the chat box. For me, the chat box is probably the best way that we're actually going to be able to communicate. One, directly to the panelists. So we've got Amy sitting in the background, another member of the Real Schools team. Adam will be dropping in and out, but also the opportunity to post and make sure that everyone is hearing your voice and making sure everyone's sharing those same questions or those same thoughts. So I think that's really important when we come to webinars. We can take the angle of sitting back and listening, and at times we need to do that. I get that. It's good just to be able to sit back and tune in and tune out and be able to pick up a few points along the way. But at other times, I think it's a good opportunity to be able to say, right, can I engage? Can I give my own personal growth, my own personal sort of development, a bit of a shining light here, and can I engage in this in a different way? So what I'm going to ask is if we can just start off by opening that chat box if you haven't already got that. And within the chat box, there's a couple of options. I just want you to use the drop-down box there and make sure that it's got panelists or everyone, panelists and everyone. It depends on what it looks like for your screen. And just type a little message in there to, one, give me a bit of feedback to make sure that I know you're listening and you can hear me and that the sound is okay. But really what I want to hear about is how are you actually feeling? What's going on for you today? We're talking about responding. We're talking about checking in circles. We're talking about a couple of other different things at different times. How are you feeling? Just give me one word to describe how that is for you at the moment. I want to sort of give a bit of a look there. Give you a second. Anxious, Jody. Yeah, I get that. It's so true, isn't it? Thank you. Anyone else? Just to make sure, I'm probably more interested. I've got a few people in that sound. Yeah, anxious, Sonia. Yep. Sounds good. At school today. Good on you, Kathy. Doing a great job there at, I guess, leading a great charge, great team. Good morning. Yep. All right, so we've got people on deck today. We've got people probably taking some holiday time, and we're all good to go. So what I want to do is jump in first of all with what is it we're actually aiming for today. I guess what's my learning intention? When we set up this suite of webinars, what we sort of talked about was this opportunity to be able to provide staff with the chance, one, to upskill, to build their own personal knowledge, but also to respond to the growing demands that are presenting in schools. And really, when we set this webinar up, what we were sort of talking about was the fact that the timing might be right, depending on, you know, how the next few weeks unfold for a return to school. I think now it'd be fair to say that we're a fair bit off a return to what normal schooling would look like. So today, my learning intention or my goal would be twofold. First of all, it is to give you some skills to how you can support, or some tools rather, for how you can support your kids during this trying time, but also it's about when your students return. What's it actually going to look like when they walk through the door? What is a normal classroom environment? So I'm going to probably say that at the end of today, when you get that email sent to you from Chris, and when you get that email of the slide deck, that maybe you provide a spot, if it's of any value to you, just to save it in your inbox there, and maybe you want to revisit that as we get closer to our students returning. For me, just a bit of an overview of what we're going to be covering today, so that you're on that same journey as me, and it's around really the principles for circles. There are 5 principles, and we're going to talk about that. I'm going to drill down into the different types of circles and touch on the 5 circles, but really focus heavily around response circles, and practical takeaways will be my goal. I don't want you to walk away from today without some sort of plan in place that you'll be able to implement either 1 next week or 2 next term. So really it's about coming right down to what's practical. Before I sort of flick to those 5 principles, I guess the question that sort of sits there for me is, why would we even use a circle in our classroom? And I'm sort of talking on a broader level now. Really, for anyone, and I know just looking at the attendees list, there are a number of people who are already part of a partnership school or have done some work with us at real schools before. But the important thing for me is that when we sort of go, well, where do circles actually sit? For us, it fits under the restorative practice framework. And the part of it that sort of fits really well is that when we talk about restorative practices, what we're talking about is building community, strengthening relationships within our school community. And that's not just about relationships between our staff and our students, it actually includes our parents as well. And it's also about reducing conflict and repairing harm. And harm's that sort of word that we often focus on. But really, when we talk specifically about circles, I think it's just one way of being able to support some of the things that we're doing around that restorative practice framework. There are a number of other aspects to it, but circles are a safe and effective way of strengthening our classroom culture. And, you know, for anyone that may have joined me Friday of last week, it was now, I think Kathy, you were certainly on board for the webinar that we were running around being firm and fair. And we talked about the social discipline window. And one part of that is around doing with the students. And when we do learning with the students, we're authoritative. And that means that we use our power through our practice. And also we're respectful. And really, circles allow us to be able to provide that type of environment in our classroom. So that's that broader level. And I see Kathy's just posted there. Yes, thanks, Kathy. Appreciate that. So let's get into the 5 principles, because I think if we understand the 5 principles, it gives us a bit of a guide to when and where and how and why we should use our circles. So number 1, in terms of the 5 principles, is that the circle must serve your learning program. Now, as I said, this applies to all circles that we run. When we have a focus on learning, and it's not just about discipline, I think one of the myths that floats around restorative practices is that people feel that it's a way of handling discipline issues within your school. And it is that. It does help with that. But it's actually about learning and informing your practice as well. So it's not just an add-on. We don't do a circle because we feel that we should be doing circles. It's got to actually fit for us. And really, we look for opportunities for circles to make our practice more effective and make it easier for us to be able to actually, 1, explain a concept, or 2, to be able to work through a situation. So it's got to serve our learning program. How can we create that circle today to make sure that it suits our needs? That's the question that I'm going to be working through a little bit later on. All right, circle principle number 2, engagement is everything. I love this photo because I just think that it's hard to tell who the leader of the group is. It tells me that all heads look towards that sort of direction of what we aim for in terms of engagement, that we see that people are collaborating, they're actually working together. We're going to unpack engagement a little bit later on because, again, it's a key part of why we actually run circles. And what we're doing here is we're increasing our chances. I want to say that that increase of chances of success when we run circles are really, really important because, again, we're not going to fit the needs of every single student within our class. And I think that's a fair acknowledgement that we need to put out on the table early, that it's not just about saying, right, if we practice in this way, every single student will now jump on board. That's actually not the case, but we're increasing our chances of success and engagement. So circle principle number 2 is around engagement. Number 3, less is more. And I think this again hits on that myth that restorative practices takes time. It's a really time-consuming thing, and although I believe in the philosophy or the ethos behind it, I don't have time to do it. When I say less is more, I'm going to say the ideal circle will sit between 5 and 15 minutes. Lots of people think that circles need to take up a significant amount of time. You know, a whole literacy block needs to be dedicated to circles. When we come in from lunch, we're going to run a circle until the end of the day. And that's actually not the case. It's about chunking down and having quick transitions. And it helps with our fidgety boys, the boys that like to have a little bit of change in their program as, you know, we struggle to get them to sit on task for an extended period of time. In some ways, it can really help with breaking down and reducing the number of brain breaks that we need to have across a certain time. Because what we're doing is we're chunking down instruction and making it easy, and it's bite-sized for our students to be able to go back and then get themselves back onto task. So really, it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out, time-consuming thing. Number 4, position. Again, I'm going to reference back to that firm and fair and talk about learning with the kids. And I think this really fits well here, that when we talk about with our students, what we are avoiding doing is being that sprinkler of information. When we stand out the front, we say, I'm the holder of all knowledge, and I am now going to spray that knowledge all over you and you're going to learn. What we're actually doing is we're getting on the same level. We're being part of the learning process with our students. And really, the key thing here is if we can position ourselves in exactly the same position as students, it takes away the power or the perceived power that we hold in the classroom. So if your students, like I am in that photo there with a greater foundation kids, if they are sitting on the ground, then you sit on the ground. If they're laying down, then you lay down. If you want to stand up, then they stand up, but be on that equal playing field as they are. And principle number 5 is that we have in our 5 different circles, 3 of our circles or our different types of circles are flexible and 2 are scheduled. And there's times when we want to be really structured and scheduled about them. And there's times when we just need to call on, throw them in and be really flexible because we're responding to the changing demands within our classrooms or around our school environment. So what's the 5 look like? Well, what are they actually sort of covering? And I'm just going to quickly talk through them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them today, and I'm pushing through pretty quick. I know a couple of people have already seen or 2 actually using some of these circles. The first one there is the check-in circle. And I'm going to say that alongside response circles, the check-in circle would probably be equally the most important circle that we could use when our students return to school from this period of time or period of absence from face-to-face learning. And really, it's focused on the present. So how are we actually feeling? What's it like to be back at school? What's it like to be back with our friends? What are the things that we're a little bit anxious about? Because absence, in some cases, increases our anxiety levels. So we've had that period of absence. What are we feeling like is challenging us now at the moment? The second one is the check-out. And the check-out is also quite scheduled. So check-in and check-out circles, more than sort of once a week. And the important thing about them is that I think the check-in starts the week, the check-out finishes the week. The second sort of chunk of circles are the 3 flexible circles. And when I talk about the 3 flexible circles, the one that we're going to focus on today is response circle, but there is also a preparation and a learning circle that sits under that umbrella of flexibility. When I talk about preparation circles, what I'm talking about is when we've got some change on the horizon that we know about and we're preparing our students for that. It might be a new event. It might be something completely different to the norm. And what we want to do is go, right, how can we give ourselves and our students the best possible chance of success in this changing environment? And it might be if there's going to be a period of absence, you're going to take a couple of days off. So what you'll do is you'll go, right, I need to prepare you for a CRT to come in. And I think we've all had those days when we've returned from a CRT taking our class and it was just an absolute disaster. And we see all the notes and we go, oh, what just happened? Well, if we can prepare our students, because again, it talk about that anxiety, the absence of a plan or the absence of knowing is what sometimes triggers our highly anxious kids. So it's about making sure that they feel comfortable. It's also really good if we're going out of school on an excursion or something similar to that. The learning circle, and I'm going to jump response circles, the learning circle is around an opportunity just to inform practice and to be able to sort of build it into your pedagogy and be able to sort of introduce new topics is a really good way of using a learning circle. Introducing a new unit of work, checking for knowledge. When we're sort of going down that track of we've been in this sort of space, we've been doing this task, we've been doing this little unit for a period of time, I just want to check for knowledge, then a learning circle is a great way to be able to do that. And even explain what the upcoming assessment piece may look like. Now, if I was to go, right, let's focus heavily on response circles because of the nature of today, and this is really where the importance sits. I just want to sort of touch on that concept of flexibility, because flexibility for the greater period of time would be referring to the fact that we can use this when something has popped up, when we've needed to do or respond to or react to a situation that's occurred in our yard and we actually haven't planned for it to happen. So although it's considered flexible, given the nature of what we're talking about today, given the nature of the fact that we know that we're on a school closure period, potentially for a term, potentially longer, then we actually have some time to be a little bit more structured about it. So I just don't want people to get confused with why is it sitting alongside a flexible approach when really I need it to be quite structured. And I think in the light of what we're facing now, it can be quite structured. So let's get into what is it that we're talking about when we're talking about response circles. A response circle is responding to something that has happened, or it's about restoring something. So going back to and fixing and making things better again. What a response circle is great for, it's great for unforeseen circumstances. Now, when we're not ready and something presents, what we can use is a response circle to be able to find a way forward. And it's a way of sitting down and saying to our students, we have a process. We've got a way of dealing with this, and it's no one's fault. There's no blame, but we need to fix this together. So what we're actually doing is we're providing a way or a forum to be able to deal with the situation that's popped up. Now, these situations might be negative or they might be positive. So it's not just when something goes wrong, we have to have a response circle. We can actually have a response circle to highlight and to find a way to celebrate great things that have happened. How do we respond to success? How do we respond to something in a really positive light? Generally speaking, the types of response circles that I've been running in schools and the type of response circles that you may be familiar with are things like maybe when an excursion didn't go well. And I'm sure we've all had that situation when we run an excursion and it was an absolute disaster. We lost a kid, the bus broke down, we arrived home late, all of the things just kept adding up and we needed to respond to that. We had some behavioural issues, they were thrown into the mix as well. Another one that I often run is when we've had that guest speaker. I'm sure we've all had that situation when a guest speaker has been at our school, started talking and we're just thinking, please, please, please sit quietly, please don't say that, please don't do this. What we can do is we can actually use a response circle to be able to deal with that. A classmate that may be sick's another one when we've had a period of absence. And if I sort of flip that and give an example of a positive, it would probably be when a student has achieved something. So the last response circle that I'd run in a positive way was around a young lad who had been awarded a Youth of the Year at a local government level. And it was a great achievement. And his classmates wanted to find a way to be able to give him a pat on the back. So what we did is we responded. We restored something, we restored that sort of celebration back into the classroom, and we were able to sort of highlight that. So now if I was to take it and apply it to the current situation, what we've got is that's the circumstance that we didn't expect. I don't think there'd be anyone that would be sitting here sort of going, right, well, I knew that we were going to be on school shutdown for a period of time. Our kids were prepared for this. We're going to be okay. What we're doing is this is a changing landscape, as I mentioned, and what we need to do is keep changing the goalposts a little bit for us to be able to keep shooting at. So it's about responding to that in a real time. All right. Just as you'll see there, I'm just going to point out, Amy will be in the background posting for the last 2 webinars. If you do nothing else, sign up. I know that people are certainly extremely busy at the moment, but it'd be great if you could sign up and then you at least get the notes. And if you've got any other questions at any stage, don't feel like you have to wait for me to ask, just pop it in the chat box there and I'll do my best to answer them throughout the morning. All right, so if we lived in the perfect world, what would a restoration actually look like? And I think, I've got to talk to the mobile phone here that a couple of weeks ago, I actually got a new mobile phone and I remember back a few years ago when I got my last phone and I had to do a restore from iCloud. And what happened was it was a disaster. And I was surprised this time how easy it was. So basically in that, going back 4 or 5 years, I had to reload everything and passwords and everything like that to try and get it back to normal. And it sort of got me thinking when I did a restoration this time around with my new phone, that wouldn't it be nice if we could just press the button on our students, we go back to teaching and learning. And the reality is we know that that's not the case. That what we've got is this pandemic that is providing us with different challenges at different stages. And that's 1 as adults, 2 as just community members, 3 as teachers, and 2, I guess, to take that a step further, those same feelings are going on in our family home. So what we need is a strategy or an approach to be able to deal with that. And the strategy that we're going to use is the response circle. So if I go back to the subtitle, the question is, how do we speak to our students to facilitate a smooth return? And ultimately, that's what we're all aiming for here, that smooth return. I think the 2 key things. Number 1 is just around empathy. Show a little bit of empathy and care and understanding. And why I keep coming back to empathy as being the key is because if we can walk in the shoes of our students, we are more likely to be able to provide better support than looking at it from that teacher angle. And again, I don't think empathy is something that people, I know looking down the list of participants, I've got some really empathetic people in this, were in this webinar today. But why I sort of put that out there is I think it's something that's worthwhile having as a discussion across your whole school. And it's really about listening and making sure that it's about our students and not about us. Because the challenge that people are going to bring back to the school environment will sometimes mean that they'll start talking about their experience, their personal family lives, the challenges that they had, their husband that was put off from work or whatever else it may be. And that sort of discussion doesn't necessarily help the students. It also doesn't help the students if we talk about how great our life was in isolation. If we found that it was, we were coping, that our kids did a good job, that it was all okay. And then we get back and we sort of talk from that point of view. That actually doesn't help our students either. So we just need to be a little bit mindful of those challenges. The second one, when we talk about a smooth return, it's got to come back to you don't have to fix it. And I go back to that key word, how do we facilitate a smooth return, that word facilitate, because you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be able to fix things before your students walk back in the door. All you need to do is be able to share the responsibility and provide a framework for them to be empowered to fix their own problems and take control of their own situations. So I think, again, it's a really important discussion to have, that our job as teachers isn't to fix this. Our job is to facilitate and to be able to walk beside our students so that they can take some responsibility for how they feel and for making sure that they restore their own feelings of trust and love and whatever else it may be in education and generally on a broader community level. So the other sort of things that go there alongside that are, number 1's take your time. A couple of things about when we're talking with students is that I think the risk that we're going to run when we return to the classroom is that we're going to feel this pressure. We're going to feel like we have this expectation to complete 12 months of learning in 6 to 8 or to 9 months. And really, that's an unfair expectation. So what I'm going to say is that you need to take a focus away from task-driven and to take a focus away from getting through curriculum. And you need to go, right, 220 isn't going to be normal. I need to focus on connection first. I need to focus on relationship first. And then the teaching can follow. So when we have that first day that we're all looking forward to, when we get to see our students again, when we give them a big cuddle, I know that we don't feel like, we can touch our students given some of the regulations and rules around it. But what I'm going to say is let's put teaching second and let's make sure that we focus on that relationship first and foremost. Just reading there, Jody, thank you. Yeah, and I reckon that's the risk. That's why I'm going to say let's put our priorities right at the start there. And that's certainly going to be the challenge that I think the next phase of challenges that we're going to face. All right. Second thing is mix it up. I'm going to put 100%, actually more than 100% if I could do that, trust in that you know your kids. You know what their needs are. You know what supports they've got at home, what role models they've got at home or haven't got at home. you know what siblings they've got, you know the situation for your kids. What we can do is when we find the opportunity to get together with our students, that the circle is a way of being able to discuss all of those things. But there's not a one size fits all model. We're going to have to mix it up. So depending on where you're at with your class, depending on the fact, you know, some students will respond better than others, different types of structures and circles will fit your needs. But don't just go with the standard circle the whole time. What I'm talking about there is mix up the timing. You know, go through a couple of quick grabs, then follow it up with a bit of a longer circle. Look at the location. You know, do we have a spot within our classroom or within our school environment that our kids love? Well, let's look at that. Let's change it up a little bit. Let's focus on social issues, learning issues. Let's focus on personal feelings. So again, it doesn't just have to be a response to COVID. It can be a response to how you're going on the weekend. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on too. And really, for people who have worked with us, the different sorts of circles. So a progressive circle, where we actually have that collaboration taking place in the circle environment, the fishbowl, and, you know, really for me, the variety is the spice of life. So it's important that we are taking that concept of what we think is a circle and saying, how can I be creative with this? How can I mix it up for my students? Again, it increases engagement. The reality is too, that not all of your circles will work every single time. And it's not that one will be better than the other. It's just that in that moment, at that time, with that discussion, maybe I could have gone with a different approach. And that's what I love about restorative practice, that word practice. It just takes practice, and it is something that we need to keep working at. And the last sort of key thing, I believe that this is the greatest opportunity we have, because it is such unprecedented times. We've actually got an opportunity to put a little bit of a plan in place. I'm just going to say right now, do not be too rigid with your plan. You're just going to have to roll with it. You're going to have to divert down a different track at different times, and you're going to have to go, you know what, I thought this was going to work and it didn't, because I didn't realize that when my student returned, this is the feeling that he was going to have. When I talk about the plan, a couple of key things that sit there for me. Number one is the architecture of your classroom. What I'd say is mix it up a bit. Good opportunity in a period of absence that when your students return to go, right, things are a little bit different here. One, we acknowledge that, but two, our classroom feels a little bit different. Let's put some effort into that architecture. Have we got a good space for a circle? Have we got the right amount of space so that I can see everyone's face? That, you know, we often talk when we get into the in-class support days with our workers around squircles, and it's sort of like a square, sort of like a circle. We've got kids sort of in and around under tables. Ideally, if you can provide the closest possible shape that represents a circle where you can see everyone's face, that's ideal. Talk and collaborate with your colleagues, because I think, you know, that's something that, again, we're aware of and we're doing pretty well. And again, you know, I've talked about my wife a couple of times, and she's actually currently in a class at the moment online, but they had an extended staff meeting last night, and I listened into that. And to be honest, I actually felt that the focus on connection was great. And I felt that there was high value in it for the people who had joined for all the right reasons. And sometimes we underestimate that value. So I think it's a good opportunity just to talk about that connection. And you would have seen there that Amy's just posted there about an upcoming webinar on Friday, which is our last of the series. And it's about that leading reconnection. I think it's a really important thing, that collaboration. And I'm going to say the last thing about the plan is check in with your kids. Do the hard yards now, and it will pay you back later. If we can spend the time consolidating the relationship now, if we can spend the time front loading our kids, if we can spend the time reinforcing those great things that happened in our classroom and just keeping them at the front of their thinking, when we get back to that environment that we ask our students to circle up, they'll see value, they'll be ready for that, and straight away it'll give us that best chance of success. So it's about doing the hard work now that may feel like there is that element of disconnection, but really I think we probably haven't seen how great that impact is going to be yet, and we're probably never going to be able to measure that until we actually get back into the classroom. So don't underestimate those check-ins with your students. All right, so I'm just going to have a quick drink. So when it comes to running response circles, and when I get the opportunity to run response circles, either one with partner schools or two, when I was running them back when I was teaching, and then also when I was a leader, I had like a really quick and simple 3-step method that I used. And number one was predict how the kids are going to feel. And this is sort of the pre-work. This is the work that you can start to do today. How will the kids be feeling? This is where we show some empathy towards what their different home lives will be. Try and think about the different ways that your students will be feeling, the different ways that they've been challenged at the moment. What we're going to do a little bit later on is we actually try and brainstorm some ways and approaches to these challenges so that we can prepare ourselves to respond. The thing that we're trying to respond to and predict, it doesn't just have to be directly related to school and to learning. I think that's really important. It could be a personal situation. It just could be about their daily structure. You don't have to be right with this either. When you make these predictions, or when you're thinking, right, when my students return, these are the sort of things that they're going to be talking about. What I'm going to say is, if you are miles off, if you are completely wrong, that's okay. But really, it's just giving you a little bit of insight to maybe thinking through step 2 and 3 by predicting how they're actually going to feel. What are the challenges that they're going to be sitting with them at the moment? Step number 2 is around what's their personal response going to be. So looking at it from a student's point of view, how do we actually get them to start having an opportunity to reflect on their personal point of view? And step 2 is when we start to take it to the circle. What I'd be saying now again is, maybe start by having discussions in the circle. So once we circle up, what we've actually got is an opportunity to talk from a personal point of view without sharing front loading or coming into the circle about how we actually feel. How are you feeling about this? And we could do it a couple of different ways to capture how they're feeling personally. Number 1 is that we could just run that sort of structured approach where we go around the circle and every person within the circle gets the chance to say a couple of things. I'm going to go back to one of the principles here, and it's around engagement. And what I'm going to say is just be really mindful that we don't want students to be talking for 10 to 15 minutes about how they feel personally. And then we go to student number 2, who then speaks for another 5 to 7 minutes, and then student number 3, because what will happen is 1, engagement will significantly decrease. 2, it's about the timing. We're going to run over time. So it's important that we just grab a couple of words from every single student about how they're feeling. The second way that we could do that is, and I refer to it as being like a popcorn circle, where it just sort of pops all over the circle. And what we do there is we go, right, who's got a suggestion? Who wants to share something? How are you feeling about this? And generally our kids that like to be heard often will jump in straight away. And that's okay initially. And you might only capture 2 or 3 different views from your students, but all you're doing is you're giving the prompts for other students to start and get their thinking and start to get their reflection happening at a personal level. I'd have to say that why this step's so important is because kids aren't awesome at reflecting. And I think that, if I go back again, I often use my kids as examples. End of the day, I pick them up from school and ask how their day was, or how was this particular part of the day, or what did you learn today? And I get hit with that lovely response of, it was all right, or how was maths today? What did you learn? No, I don't know. And I go, right, well, why not? What are we not doing well as a way of reflecting on the day that actually happened there? So what we want to do is we want to be able to provide opportunities for students to reflect and build their capacity to reflect. And one way we could do that is by music. And, while we're in the circle, you could do this. Right, I'm going to put a song on. I just want you to think for 2 minutes while that song is playing about one thing, about 2 things that's going on for you at the moment. Don't talk to anyone else. I just want to get your personal feeling here. Promote some reflection to take place. Number 2 is exercise. Let's go for a walk. So I actually set up in the circle what I'm looking for. These are the things that we're going to do. Now we're going to leave the classroom as a group. We're going to go for a walk around the school. When we walk around the school, we're actually going to walk in silence. And I just want you to think about 3 things around how you felt during absence of friendships over the course of the last term. It might be a journal. When we go back to our classes, what we're going to do, when we go back to our tables, what we're going to do is we're going to start writing. Just free write as many things as you can about how you're actually feeling. Other ways that we can get our students to reflect in this stage is, we put up a writing prompt, or we share that in the circle. Checklists, record a video. Again, we underestimate the way that, kids are connected to social media and the way they're connected to IT. Get them to make some of those cool videos that we're seeing pop up so frequently now. I think it's a good way to allow kids just to capture how they're feeling and to reflect on how they are at the moment. Visual representations, For our really artistic kids, go and draw. Get something down there that is a reflection. And the other one that I love to use is this little sort of framework. I know there's lots of different frames, but I call it the pigs. What's something positive? What's something interesting? What's a growth opportunity and what's a suggestion? So what we're doing in step 2 is we're actually providing in our circle, we're providing what we're looking for. We're getting kids to reflect. Now, I just sort of sit there, try to use mindfulness myself. Hey, you know what? Anne-Marie, I agree 100% there. I've been doing a fair bit of that and probably stepped it up over the last month. And really for me, this has been something that I wish I had sort of tapped into a number of years ago, especially when I was in the classroom, also a principal. I probably underestimated the value of that. So again, great to do some of this stuff with our kids. Now, step number 3. Step number 3 is what's the collective response? Now, this is where we get to the key part of the response circles. And really, we've done that personal reflection. So how can we come up with a collective response? How can we come up with a plan to help? How are we going to respond to this situation? We don't need to all agree on this, but we just might feel the same if we can respond as a group. Well, sorry, we just might agree that we can acknowledge there are different feelings, but can we respond together as a group? And what's really important here, this is sort of that key part that I'm going to come back to around some of the principles, engagement. Engagement's the key at this part here. So to find out the collective response, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we engage. And the different ways that we can do that within our circle. We can do the really basic turn and talk. So turn and talk to the person next to you. And this is where we're sharing our personal feedback. It's a way of actually being able to talk about our personal feelings or our personal reflections or how it's affected us personally with someone else in the group. Other different ways, we can go back to our table groups, maybe to breakout circles. And I'm going to give you an example a bit later on of a breakout circle. So being able to say, right, we're in our large circle of 25. We've done a little bit of reflection. We've done the turn and talk. So now we've taken 1 to 2. What we actually want to do is take that 2 to a group of 6. Let's create a breakout group for us to go and have a chat about that. Reading groups, kids can allocate, randomly allocate, or kids can pick their own groups. Again, your kids, but what we're looking for is a collective response so that when we come back to the circle, what we're able to do is start to talk about action. And that's the restoration. That's the restoring the old and making sure that it's right and ready to go again. So when we come back to the mix, again, not everyone has to speak, but what we've provided is an opportunity for everyone to at least feed into the discussion that we've had. And really the key question here is, how are we going to respond to this? What are we going to do? And again, if I say right now that out of the number of participants that we've got sitting here, we're going to vary from foundational prep right through to year 12, there are different stages of learning that require a different approach. And we're going to touch on that, but your kids, your stage of learning better than anyone else. And I go often when I get to this collective response stage, and when I get to this sort of collective approach to taking action, I basically say to the kids, 25 heads are better than 1. And it promotes collaboration. Now, again, we don't always need to agree, or we don't always need to think it's the greatest idea, but kids start to collaborate and bounce off each other and come up with the solutions. So if I was to go, right, let's have a look at the different stages of learning quickly. And let's take that 3-step approach. I'm just going to touch on the first step as a way forward. And really that's around, if I was going to make some predictions about what the challenges are actually going to be, I'd some try and get a bit of insight to what I'm thinking the kids would be feeling at the moment. If I was to go, right, for early years, what is it? Really, it's around, it's probably going to be around their family. Maybe things like they haven't seen their grandparents. They haven't seen that special person. The other really key thing I think about this group is that they're going to forget their routine. We've spent in particular foundation and prep years, we have just spent the hardest 10 weeks of the year setting up routines ready for our students to go to great things throughout the year. And then what's happened is they're going to forget that. And that's okay. So I believe, again, this is just my personal opinion, I believe that it's our early years kids that potentially might be the least affected long-term by this school closure period. I think that we can bounce back with them probably better than some of the other year levels or some of the other stages of learning. So really, that's going to be the number one challenge that they'll face. When I talk about what's the middle or the upper primary, the issues are going to start to change a little bit. They're going to be school related. They're going to probably start to come into some worries about learning. I think this is sort of where we're really going to get that sort of feeling of, I've got this absence from school, and again, I'd like to think that our teachers are probably doing a better job than everyone has ever imagined around this, and that's probably the thought that I hold. But there'll be still that absence of face-to-face contact that people will feel like they're falling behind. The other key thing about these groups, if I was to say what are the things that we're going to respond to for them, it'll probably be things around social issues. So no friendships, to no friends that they've been in contact with, maybe only their siblings, and there could be a number of years apart. But also this group's probably the first group that we're starting to go, right, there's some sport issues, there's some dance issues, there's some extracurricular, some music lessons that we used to love having after school, and we've no longer got them there. So really the issues will change a little bit for the middle to upper primary. Lower secondary, again, I think it sits around social issues for the lower secondary. And what I'm talking about there will be things like no physical contact, but I actually reckon we're going to see a bit of a spike when we return to school, a bit of a spike in the number of online social media issues, and dare I say it, around bullying. Because what we're going to have is this situation where kids haven't had the opportunity to work face-to-face. And when they don't have that opportunity, what's going to happen is they're going to be saying and doing things that will lead to other issues being created online, and kids don't get a chance to talk through that. Adults don't get a chance to intervene. So I think that social media for this particular group is going to be a real challenge as we move forward. The other one there is around that friendship absence. And then the last group that if I was to sort of go, the last stage of learning, if I was going to be bold and predict, and I've sort of got to come back, I love this photo. This is actually a group of year 11 and 12 students, so senior students. And this was a check-in circle that sort of evolved to a response circle pretty quickly. And really, when we talk about that senior end, for me, it's going to probably be around VCE results. It's going to be around engagement. The absence of a teacher. And why I say engagement, I reckon we're going to see a large number of kids that are just going to drift off into the ether from our upper secondary kids. There's going to be social issues, like they've missed 18th birthday parties, they've missed opportunities for driver's license, all of those sort of things. So my challenge to you, and why I set that up in the way I have today, is what I want you to do is to go, right, if I could take 10 minutes of my time with my colleague that I work in the next classroom, or with my team members, even across the school, and say, let's predict the challenges that we're going to face as a group of staff, then what we're actually doing is we're giving the best possible chance of success. Now, if I was to go, let's look at the next step. And the next step will be things around stage 2, which is what's the individual ways? How are we actually going to do it? Again, you know your groups better than what I do. But you might have a whole range of different things happening, like for the junior kids, it'll be stuff like drawing pictures. Get them to draw pictures. Go away from the circle, draw the pictures, and then come back. It might be the recording and the interview. Things like the music and the go for a walk might be really worthwhile for our upper primaries and our lower secondaries. And then there might be things like, how are we actually going to address this for our senior students? And it might be going back to, I reckon you could the circle sort of keeps moving around and it keeps evolving. The turn and talk is great for our senior students. We're actually getting that interaction, and it's great for our early kids as well, our early years kids. The really key part is the collaborative stage, the stage where we take what's collective action. When we come back to the circle, what is it that we're going to do? And again, it might be things like cyber safe videos. If I was to take the early years, it might be things like, let's have a grandparent day, a special person's day, where we actually get those people that have been absent in our lives. Let's get them back into the school, and let's connect them with learning again, and let's make sure that we're restoring that absence or that gap that we had. When I talk about some of the things that we might need to do with the secondaries or the upper kids, it might be things around getting careers advisors in to speak. People that have expertise in curriculum, authorities, etc., to come in and talk about what this ATAR and this VCE thing is actually going to look like. So the important thing here is that when we come back to that call for action or that collective approach, when we're in the circle, what we're actually doing is we're coming up with solutions to help restore. The important thing here is that we don't necessarily all need to agree, but what we're aiming for is to be able to provide a way for people to say that this is a chance for me to fix or to repair or to be able to improve the situation that I was once feeling. The last sort of part is the remote circle stuff. And I didn't want to spend huge amounts of time on this today because one, I think people are already doing enough great stuff in this space, but I do think there's an opportunity to be able to run some remote circles that allow us to be able to not necessarily restore just yet, but start to move down that path. And really, it's about how do we maintain connections, how do we build the trust, and what's the relationship sort of strengthening that I'm doing right now that's going to pay me back later. Really, the online forums that you are using in your school are serving those needs straight away. So things like Zoom, and I know Zoom, and I've got, we talked a little bit about some of the great aspects or added features of Zoom that people probably haven't realized in one of our team meetings the other day. The second thing is around Google Hangout. I know a number of schools will use Google Hangout. Teams, there's a growing number of schools using Teams, and again, it's a great way to be able to collaborate. It's a great way to be able to start to get kids to reflect and then to share those reflections into a space that then starts to become the call to action. So think about what it is in terms of the platform that you have available to, and from there, what can you actually do to be able to promote that collaboration to take place. Now, in the remote circles, and I'm just going to quickly touch on the Zoom, there's a function in Zoom that's called Zoom Breakout, and it allows you to take your class, if you had an online class, and to go, right, we've got 26 of us in here, including the teacher. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that and I want to create 4 little breakout spaces. And I'm actually going to divide the kids up. And then as a teacher or as the facilitator of that meeting, you are jumping between different breakout groups and listening in on the conversation that's taking place between those different breakout groups. So again, it's sometimes unrealistic to ask 25 people to come together, in particular in an online forum, and all to get their say, all to have their voice on the table. But if we can create these little ways to be able to increase engagement, the chances of success, again, start to increase. So think about what's the platform that you're using. Think about the different ways that you have, that you can access to be able to support what you're doing. All right, I'm just going to quickly go back to this. I've touched already on the importance of today and tomorrow. I do think that if I go back to the start and say, right, what's the best way forward here? It's to continue the great things that you're doing and to continue the outstanding work that we are doing across the education sector. But really, there are opportunities that present today that will set us up for a great platform for tomorrow. So I hope that today's webinar has served you in some way, shape or form. I am just going to quickly touch on the last couple of webinars. You've seen there in the posts on Friday, Adam will be back for leading Reconnection. But if you're looking for something, again, targeted more towards classroom teachers, because Adam is more focusing on leadership levels, Amy will be back tomorrow and she'll be doing when the kids come back. And again, providing that same sort of lens that I have today, that although it might not be for a while that our students are returning, it's a great way just to get us to start and think about what it is that we can do to be able to provide the best possible chance for our students to succeed when they do return. So if you've got a chance, I'd love you to sort of sign up to that now and join Amy tomorrow. You can see in the chat there that the link is there. And just before I leave you, I, like always, want to make the offer there for anyone that wants to reach out. My mobile number sits there and my email. At any stage, feel free just to give me a call, shoot me an email if you've got any further questions. I want to say thanks for joining me today. I want to say thanks for the people that have joined me for the last number of webinars that I've been running and for our entire team. So it's certainly been great to see people following up with some good questions and really getting involved in some of the stuff that we've been offering. And I hope that it served you. That's my number one hope. Have a great day. Go well if you're back at school this term. If you're not, enjoy your holidays, and looking forward to certainly doing some work with you down the track. I'm just going to check the chat box, make sure we're all good, and then I'll let you get on your way. So thank you.